Lange, and I am the post-secondary counselor here at Parkway Central. As you came into the lobby, the other post-secondary counselors from North, West, and South are also here this evening, so we are here to support you and answer any questions that you have, but our highlight tonight is Erin Gallagher. She is a representative from the Financial Aid Office at St. Louis University, and she is going to share information about the exciting FAFSA. So there's a lot of information to cover. As most of you likely know, the FAFSA is being recreated as we speak. Yes, and is supposed to open at some point this month. So that date has not been formally announced, and it's can certainly be very frustrating, but the goal is that it will open sometime this month, so we wanted as a district to offer an opportunity for families before it opens to learn as much about it as possible. Erin has screenshots of what the actual application should look like. I said should. Will look like, and hopefully as you leave this evening you will feel prepared for when that announcement goes live and you're able to log in and access the FAFSA. It will be more familiar to you. So it is great that we have this community resource that SLU provides to come into our community and share this information and be an expert on the topic. So we appreciate that. This event is also being live streamed and recorded, so each of your high school counselors has the links to that if they haven't shared that out, so you will be able to go back and rewatch all of this exciting information or share with any of your friends who might have questions about this and were unable to attend this evening. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Erin Gallagher of SLU.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Erin Gallagher and I am the new student coordinator at Student Financial Services at SLU. As Nana mentioned, we are a community resource, so even after today, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is at the very end of this presentation. Even if your student is not considering SLU in any way, we are definitely available for you, as this can be a very stressful process, and we like to say that we're experts, or as much of an expert as we can be, especially with all of the changes coming. So to get started, I'm going to go through an agenda for tonight. If you were at the last presentation that we did back in September, October-ish, I can't quite remember, but I was here, and so some of this at the beginning will be a repeat, and then it will be all FAFSA oriented. So to start, we're going to go through different types of financial aid, FAFSA eligibility, creating that FSA ID, walking through the FAFSA itself, a financial aid timeline, and then Q&A. Feel free to also raise your hand or ask questions as we go through the presentation and you see something that is applicable to your question or applicable on the screen that applies to your question. For example, we always get asked, what assets do we include? We have a slide dedicated to assets, so if I don't answer it through the slide, definitely feel free to raise your hand then. Without questions, this presentation is about 50 minutes to an hour. With questions, we had a presentation go 2 hours last week, so get comfortable. We'll be here for a little bit. It just kind of depends on how many questions y'all have, and we have a group of about 30 to 35 right now. The last week's presentation had over 100 people, so just kind of depends on how many questions you have and if your questions build off of others in the room. So to start, different types of financial aid. There's two main categories. We have gift aid and self-help aid. You and your student are primarily going to want to focus on that gift aid, as it is free money that you do not have to pay back. To start, there's scholarships, which are merit-based. Typically, when they apply to a school, they will be considered for those merit-based scholarships. Talent-based, such as chorus, theater, dance, etc., or any athletic aid. Then we have grants. These are often need-based, and that is determined by filling out the FAFSA. That can be need-based from the institution themselves. the federal government through the Pell Grant or Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or any state aid such as Bright Flight, Missouri Access Plus, things like that. Going into self-help, there's two main categories there as well. So those are loans and employment opportunities. Loans can be the federal direct student loans that all students are eligible for by completing the FAFSA, the Parent Plus loan, which is a separate application, and then those private or alternative student loans that you and your student could apply for to finish completing or finish financing your college education. Lastly, there's employment opportunities. That can be federal work study, which is again determined by filling out the FAFSA, or non-federal work study. In my case specifically, I was not eligible for, I was not eligible for federal work study my freshman or sophomore year, but became eligible my junior and senior year, but I still had an on-campus job my freshman and sophomore year. It was just a non-federal work study job on my college campus. So how do I apply for all of that aid? Oh, I'm gonna need some water for a second. I saw some phones go up. Also feel free to take any pictures of any of these slides, and they will also be available after this presentation. For the getting any of those merit-based scholarships that will can come from the admission application, as I mentioned, it's usually determined by GPA or test scores. Some schools are test optional for admission to a school, but then could use a test score to determine further scholarships, so definitely be contacting those admission counselors. I need to cough. Excuse me. So some of those schools might need that test score in order to have your student be eligible for more aid. So definitely something to consider, and be contacting those admission counselors to get all of that information. Then we have the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. That determines federal aid eligibility, such as those Pell Grants and those student loans, as well as the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. Lastly, there's the CSS profile. This is typically required by some more selective schools that will guarantee a certain amount of aid is met. For example, Harvard says that they'll meet 100% of need, and so they will have students fill out the CSS profile in order to get a better idea of what your financial need is, and then give you aid up to that 100% of need. It does require additional information, and there is a fee involved. So if you are considering filling out the CSS profile, make sure your student is talking to all of those schools to determine if that is needed before you go ahead and fork over some dollars for that, as it's not necessarily required for all schools. For example, SLU does not use the CSS profile. So who is eligible to file the FAFSA? You must be enrolled or accepted for enrollment in an eligible program of study. You must be pursuing a degree, certificate, or other credential, and then you must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen and have a valid social security number. When should you apply? Hopefully before January 1st, but we're gonna go ahead and tell you January 1st, as that is what the federal government has said. When they were passing the FAFSA Simplification Act, they said that the FAFSA would be available on or before January 1st. We're going with January 1st, as it is December 13th, and we haven't heard any new information as to when it will be released other than by that date. It will need to be completed for the first time in the student's senior year of high school, and then every year that they wish to be in college. So for seniors this year, they will fill it out in January, and then hopefully again in October, because then that October filing will go towards their sophomore year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Most need-based aid is awarded on a first-come, first-served basis, so you're going to want to make sure that you're following each school's priority deadline. Most schools' priority deadline is February 1st, so again, stressing that you complete the application in the month of January. And then again, it must be completed each year that the student is enrolled in college. For some more information on FAFSA FAFSA simplification and the Student Aid Index. There is a simplified application process starting in 24-25, and will hopefully continue to be the same process for at least a few years. Not anticipating any more changes beyond this, but we really don't know at this point. The expected family contribution, which is what is generated by the FAFSA, will be changing to the Student Aid Index. So if you've previously filled out the FAFSA either for yourself or any older students, it is going to look a little bit different this year. Previously, the EFC could only go as low as 0. Now it will be going, the SAI will be going as low as negative 1,500. The direct data exchange will replace the IRS data retrieval tool, and consent must be granted in order to have that information all bridge over. We'll get into that a little bit more on a later slide. The calculation will use student and parent income and assets. Some questions will be different and or excluded. Again, if you filled it out in previous years, it is going to look a little bit different. And then parents will be invited as contributors to complete their section of the form instead of completing it back to back like they'd previously done. So what do I need to get started? You need your FSA ID for both parents and students. We'll get into a little bit about who needs to create that ID. You'll need about 1 hour of your time. You'll need your 2022 tax and income documents for both parent and student. So that'll be your federal tax return, your W-2s, and any financial records from that year. And then current account statements and investment records as of that date. And then your student will need to compile a list of schools to send your FAFSA results to. They can list up to 20 schools. Each school has its own individual code, but they can also search for those schools within the form. So creating that FSA ID, you will need to create that FSA ID prior to filing the FAFSA. If you haven't already done so, you can go ahead and do that now. Definitely recommend you get that all together, as it will take a couple of days for it to be authenticated by the Social Security Administration. The student and parent will each need an FSA ID. If parents are married filed jointly, only one parent needs the FSA ID. If parents are married filed separately, both parents will need the FSA ID. If parents are divorced, then it's the parent that contributes more financially to the student's life, so more than 51%, they will need the FSA ID. If that parent is remarried, then their new spouse will need that FSA ID as well, unless those parents filed jointly. Yes, sir. So yes, you will only need one FSA ID, as it is tied to your Social Security number, so you can't have more than one FSA ID. So if you already have one, you do not need to create a new one. If you have lost that for whatever reason, you can retrieve it. It's a pretty simple process, similar to just resetting your password with any other account. It will be continuously used throughout the aid process. So again, if you've already used it or already have one, you will use it each year that you are filing. So make sure to keep that information in a safe place if you haven't already. And you'll want to make sure that you are not using the parent email for the student. And the student will need to make sure that they use a non-school email. Because if they're using their high school email address, they will lose access to that at some point. And then again, they need to be able to continue to use that email address to continue to file while they're in college. So any questions about all of that before we get into the specifics of the FAFSA form? Yes, sir. It's based on the biological parent's income and assets. If you're doing 50-50, then it is whichever parent has more income and assets. Yes, sir. Any more questions? Oh, I did also want to say that we will have time for individual questions at the end if you have any like specific circumstances that you may not want to share with the group. Myself and a colleague are here, so we will be available for those individual questions at the end as well as group questions throughout. So to go ahead and get started, you will go to studentaid.gov to file the FAFSA. Again, it is free, so do not put in any credit card information on any websites when filing the FAFSA. There are several fakes out there, but this should be the primary thing that pulls up when you Google FAFSA form. At the top of the screen, it will say FAFSA form, and then there will be there's not a red box on the site, but here is a red box to show you exactly where it is. And then right next to it, there are a ton of resources available just to kind of help you go through the FAFSA should you forget everything that we talk about tonight in 2 weeks when the form comes out. You're going to want to make sure that you select the 2024-25 FAFSA form if your student is a senior currently. The 2023-2024 FAFSA form will still be available for anyone who is currently in college and will be filing the FAFSA form, but it's going to be the year that your student starts school. So if they're starting school in August, it'll be the 24-year, 25-year, because it'll go from August to May. Oh, yes. If you're going to take summer classes prior to your freshman year, then you will want to also file the 23-24 form, which is going to be entirely different than everything that we're going to talk about tonight because it is the old form and not the new form. But again, your student could be eligible for aid for those summer classes prior to their freshman year of college, as the form covers August to July, August to July, August to July. When you go to log in, we're going to start with the student side of things first. There is no real preference as to whether you start the form as a student or the parent starts the form. But again, you'll want to make sure that you're logging in with those individual IDs. You and your student can fill these out back to back, so on the same computer or on computers right next to each other, as your student will send you information on how to be a contributor. It'll give you a general walkthrough of what to expect. There's a little video, what is the FAFSA form, inviting contributors to the FAFSA form, what to expect overall, and then what it's going to look like after you submit it. For student identity information, most of this should be pre-populated based on them filing or filling out their FSA ID. There could be a few things that they might need to edit, but it should all be pretty standard since the student should be creating the FSA ID for the first time. They will need to make sure that their permanent mailing address is updated, as well as when they established their state of legal or the state of legal residence. And then this is where we're going to talk about the IRS data retrieval consent aspect. In order to be eligible for any federal aid, you and your student must give the federal government permission to share, for the IRS to share information with the Department of Education. This is information that the government already has from when you filed your taxes. It just can't share it from one entity to another without your explicit consent. So that is what it says here and what you would be signing. There are some frequently asked questions at the bottom, but basically it's saying that you give permission for the IRS to share all of that information with the Department of Education. Should you decline consent, your student will not be eligible for any federal aid, and they will be, it'll generate a rejected student aid report, which could also make them ineligible to receive any state aid, as well as any institutional aid that is need-based. Then we're going to have the student fill out some personal circumstances to determine whether they are an independent student or a dependent student. Most students will be dependent, but we'll go through some situations in which they could be considered independent. We're going to start with their marital status. And then they will go into their college and/or career school plans. This will be what college grade level they will be at the start of that 24-25 year. So for most students in this room, they will be a first-year freshman. Even if your student is going on to get a graduate degree, for example, SLU offers a 5-year master's in occupational therapy or a 6 years doctorate in physical therapy, they are still a freshman at the time of filing this form, and then when they will be filing it their next year, they'll be a sophomore. So even here at the bottom is when the student begins their 24-25 school year. Will they have their first bachelor's degree? Most students, it will be no. You're just going to want to make sure that you and your student quickly, or not quickly, but thoroughly read this, because then they might have to go in and make changes. We have several issues every year with students who say that they're getting their doctorate or getting their master's from those two programs specifically, but they are freshmen, sophomores, or juniors, and not quite in that graduate level, as the being in a graduate level affects its different levels of aid. So then these are some personal circumstances in which the student would be considered an independent student. So they are serving on active duty in U.S. Armed Forces, or they are a veteran. They have children of their own, or care for children by themselves. At any time since the student turned 13, they are an orphan or a ward of the court or in foster care. The student is or was a legally emancipated minor, or is or was in a legal guardianship with someone other than their parent or step-parent. If none of those apply, then the student will be likely considered a dependent student. If any of those apply, then the student will be considered an independent student, and they will be eligible for different amounts of aid, and will likely be selected for verification to prove those circumstances. The one last question here about other circumstances is if the student was unaccompanied and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. Again, this could also determine whether they are a dependent student or an independent student. If your student or someone who you are helping fill out the form is homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless, most school counselors are able to vouch for that and provide documentation to the school specifically on how to verify that. For some unusual circumstances, if there's any unusual circumstances that prevent the student from contacting their parent, or would contacting their parents pose a risk to the student, that's a question there as well that could determine independent or dependent status. And then if they are determined to be a dependent student, but their parents are, for whatever reason, unwilling to provide information, they could choose to apply for a direct unsubsidized loan only. They would not be eligible for any other aid. In most cases, we would like the student to be eligible for other aid, so we would hope that this question would be no, but just to be aware that this is a question on the form. So then it will ask them to tell them about their parents, so if they're married to each other, if they're not married to each other. And then this is where they would invite their parents to be contributors to the form. So parent one, and then their parent's spouse. It would give first name, last name, date of birth, social security number, and then email address. That is what your student will need in order to invite you to the form. And then continuing on into student demographics. It will ask, ooh, that's a little blurry. I don't know if anyone can read the top one, but it will ask their race and ethnicity, as well as their gender. Okay, yeah, thank you. Their citizenship status. And one thing to point out is across the top, you can see the different sections of the form. So the student will have 5 sections, the parents will only have 3 sections, and you can kind of show your progress throughout. It will ask the parent's education status, if a parent was killed in the line of duty, their high school completion status, the diploma, GED, homeschooled, and or none of the above. Their high school information, it will start with the state, the city, and then the high school itself. Just want to make sure that that's correct. When I was filling out this form, I lived in Alabama and went to Austin High School. You will not believe how many Austin high schools there are across the US. So just making sure that that is the correct information there. Confirming your high school. And then looking at the student's finances. So if the student filed a 2022 tax return, some of this information will be ported over due to giving consent for that. Then it will talk about amount of college scholarships, grants, and or benefits that they have received. This does not typically apply to students filing the FAFSA form for the first time. If they earned or had any foreign earned income exclusions, their current total cash savings and checkings accounts, their current net worth of businesses or investment farms, and then their current net worth of investments, including real estate, but excluding the home that the student lives in. And then this is where they will go and write in their colleges. They can again search by that school name or by the school code. If they want to go by school code, every school has a code on their website, typically on their financial aid website, but most students will just search by the name and then make sure it's the right one. As I mentioned, they can select up to 20 schools this year. Previously it was 10, but then once your student is a sophomore, junior, senior, you typically only need to send it to that one school unless your student is considering transferring. It'll have you verify that those are the schools that you want it sent to. Order does not matter, so they don't have to put it in preference of where they would like to attend, as long as they're all listed on there. And then it will have them review everything before they sign the form, as well as verifying that the invitations have been sent for the contributors to be adding to their form. Again, just signing and making sure that every information provided is as correct as possible. So then they will get the notification that their section is complete and that those people are the ones that need to go in and fill out their section of the form. Something to note is that each form, if it is considered inactive, then the form will be deleted. And the student would need to start over. So we highly recommend that families do this all at once. It's a 45-day period in which it would be deleted. So the student really just needs, if parents for whatever reason did not get to filing the form when the student was filing the form, the student just needs to log in again and it'll mark it as inactive or as active again. But again, it's just easier if you and your student file the form at the same time. So then this is the email that parents will get. These are screenshots that you will get when you are invited to the form. It'll say, I'll use my mom, Bridget, Aaron can't be eligible for federal student aid without your input. Help them complete the FAFSA form. It'll give them a link on where to go, and then you'll log in with your FSA ID, not the student's FSA ID. Here's what the site will look like. So if you have other things that you filed on the site before or another student's form, that will also appear all here in one place. So the first thing up here is you've been requested to be a contributor on the FAFSA for your student's name. Then it also has, these are just other examples of what could also be in your portal, but you could also very well just not have anything else in the portal. Yes, so if you have multiple students, they will all appear on that dashboard. So it'll say, you've been requested to be a contributor on the FAFSA for Aaron Gallagher. You've been requested to be a contributor on the FAFSA for Catherine Gallagher. And if there's a third student, Margaret Gallagher. And so those will all appear there, and you can decline the invitation. I would hope not, especially because your student is counting on you, but they will all appear there for you to get started. Yes, sir. The ID or the form? ID, it doesn't matter. The form, it also doesn't matter because parents can start the FAFSA form first and then invite the student on it. We're just going through it from the student perspective first because the student has more information to fill out or more sections to fill out. And for us, it makes more sense for it to go in that order, but parents can start the form first. We just don't have the screenshots of what that looks like. So it will go through some frequently asked questions. It will, again, at the top say which student it is for, so just making sure that that all looks correct. If you have multiple students, again, an overview of what the form looks like. This is very similar to what the student's view is. And then parent identity information. That top part should be the same as what you did when you created your FSA ID. If any of that has changed, say you created it 3 years ago with a previous student, you can edit that as needed. And then the permanent mailing address will be needed to be filled in if it's not already there. Again, making sure that parents provide consent so that the student is eligible to receive federal aid. This is the same consent information that the student received, just making sure that you can share the information from the IRS to the Department of Education. It'll go through some demographics about you. At the top, again, you can see the progress of the form, so demographics, financials, and your signature. Parents have a lot less information to contribute, which is good. But then you can also verify that the student's information is correct when they're filling out the form. One thing to note is that, as you can see, you cannot see student information and students cannot see parent information. That is new this year. Previously, you could see both whenever you logged in, but now it is very much separate. So here it will ask your parent current marital status. There are several options. We're gonna go with married, not separated, just for this. But I did mention at the beginning as to who would need FSA IDs. I can go through that again at the end if people still have questions, things like that. The parent state of legal residence, your financials. So this first question is if you and your family have ever are currently receiving any federal benefits, such as earned income tax credit, federal housing assistance, free or reduced price school lunch, Medicaid, refundable credit for coverage under qualified health plan, SNAP benefits, Social Security or supplemental security income, temporary assistance for needy families, or a part of the WIC program. It'll ask about your filing status. So did or will the parent file a 2022 joint tax return? This family said yes. And then it will verify your family size. I will ask the number of people in the household claimed on the 2022 tax return. That is typically, for most people, will not be changed. If your status or current situation has changed at all, you can update this, but then you will be subjected to verification for each of the schools. So just be prepared to provide information on what your family size is with that. It will still ask the number in college. However, this will not be used in generating the student aid index anymore. This is a bit of a point of contention with schools, just because previously the EFC would be split. So for example, if a family had an EFC of 50,000, one student, it would go for 50,000, two students would be 25,000 apiece, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This year, the student aid index will not be split based on number in college. So just something to be aware of, that the question will still be asked as it is required to be asked, but it will not be factored into the calculation. Each student will have their own SAI, so student aid index, and their income and assets and et cetera will be factored into that. So in my family's case, it was different because my sister filed taxes the years that she was doing it, whereas I was not filing taxes. So our EFCs were different, but it was split from the parent side between the students. This SAI will be entirely dependent on each student, so it could look drastically different, and will be that full number, not split between any number of students in college. So then looking at the parent tax return information, It will again ask if you received any earned income tax credit. It will also ask about the amount of college scholarships, grants, and benefits that the parent might have paid taxes on, as well as any foreign earned income exclusions. If the parent filing this portion of the form has received any child support, that will also need to be included here on the form. And then parent assets, current total of cash, savings, checking accounts, current net worth of businesses and investment farms, and then current net worth of investments, including real estate, but excluding the primary home. So if you only have one home, you do not need to include that on there. If you have one home as your primary home, and then you have a summer home, or if you have an Airbnb that you rent out, or an apartment, et cetera, that will need to be included on there. 401ks, if they are in a 401k or a 403b account, those will not need to be included, but if you have a separate account that is not explicitly a 401k or a 403b account that you're planning to use for your retirement, but it's not in those accounts, that must be included in your investments, simply because it does not have the stipulations and taxing restrictions that would require you to pull from those accounts. So then this will ask the other parent's information. If two parents will be filing the form, just first name, last name, date of birth, social security number, and then confirming that email address. If the parents did not file taxes jointly, then you'll do that again for all of that information again for that second parent. And then it'll have you review all of the information, personal identifiers, demographics, financials, and then signing it. Same signature page and accepting of the terms as the student. So then what happens next? So an email will be sent to confirm that both people have completed their sections of the form. The student will receive a notification once the form has been processed, and then the school will begin to receive the student will begin to receive communications from the school saying, we need more information from you, such as going through that verification process and or receiving their financial aid offers. So some key takeaways from filing the form: the FAFSA is based on prior year tax and income information. So the 24-25 FAFSA will ask for information from 2022. You will want to establish an FSA ID for both the parent and student prior to filing the FAFSA, and all contributors must provide consent in order for the student to be eligible for federal aid and have that student aid index calculated. There are help questions or hover text next to every single question on the form, which you might have noticed, that tells you exactly what information needs to go into the form, and file as early as possible, but definitely by those priority deadlines. I would stick to filing by February 1st to ensure that your student is eligible for the most aid possible. You will receive a FAFSA submission summary from the federal processor. You're going to want to make sure that that information is correct. And then each school that you list or that your student lists on the FAFSA will receive what's called an ISER, or Institutional Student Information Record. There is not currently a process or timeline for when schools will receive that information. We are hoping by February so that we can get your offers out in March and or April. But definitely be on the lookout for any communication from those schools and or your school counselors on what that timeline could look like. We ask that you were patient with us, as this is the first time we've had this happen of it being pushed back. SLU typically gives out their offers in March anyways, but we do know that some schools have previously provided offers in November or December, and now are having to push everything back simply because this whole process is pushed back. So again, we appreciate your patience with receiving your financial aid offers. Every school and every student and every family is in kind of the same boat with this, and we're hoping that it is a much smoother process next year. Financial aid offers are only given to admitted students who have completed all of those required financial aid forms, and they will include scholarships, grants, loans, and work opportunities based on the FAFSA. And again, they're only sent out by schools after students are admitted and we have received the FAFSA. So even if you filed the FAFSA January 1st, got it all in, good to go, we don't know when we're gonna get it yet. And so if we don't have it, we can't send you an offer. Something that all students are eligible for once they file the FAFSA are those federal direct student loans. With that, all students are eligible for a direct unsubsidized loan. Unsubsidized means that it will accrue interest while the student is in school. They are eligible for up to $5,500 their freshman year, $6,500 their sophomore year, and then $7,500 their junior and senior years. The current interest rate for the 23-24 year is 5.5%. And they will begin repayment 6 months after they graduate or fall below half-time status. Based on filing the FAFSA and your student's need, they could be eligible for $3,500 of that $5,500 to be a subsidized loan, meaning that that portion will not accrue interest while they're in school. Same stipulations apply of that 5.5% for this current year, and then 6 months after repayment begins, 6 months after graduation or falling below that half-time status. And then they, as their future amounts for total loan increases, so does their potential for that subsidized loan. For a general timeline for the student's senior year, August to December, admission applications and college visits, creating those FSA IDs in December, and filing the FAFSA. We were anticipating it to be open in December, so now anticipating filing in January. You will receive and review those award notices sometime in the spring, and then May 1st is the deadline to determine where your student will go to school and submit that deposit, as well as accept those financial aid offers. Over the summer, you're going to want to make a plan to cover your remaining balance and apply for Parent Plus loans or private loans, and then complete those master promissory notes and or loan entrance counseling. In July and August, registering for classes, move in, and finalizing any payment arrangements. So what now? Create that FSA ID if you haven't already. Nana so kindly created a QR code on the website to go and do create that FSA ID. Takes you right there. It's pretty simple once you get it up and going. File the FAFSA once it opens. I'm sure your counselors will be in communication with you as to when that will be open, as they are highly anticipating it, as well as we are. Have a family conversation about what paying for college is going to look like, whether it's the parents' full responsibility, the students' full responsibility, of mix of both, what your total budget is for all 4 years. Financial aid offers are 1 year offers. They can be renewable for all 4 years, but that final balance or that remaining balance is a 1 year balance. So if it has a leftover of $10,000 after scholarships, grants, etc., then it's going to be about $40,000 if your student is anticipating graduating in 4 years. Every school that receives federal aid has to have a net price calculator on their website. Ours is currently up to date for the 23-24 school year. Isabel and I worked on it earlier this semester, but we don't have the billing, the tuition prices and everything set for 24-25 yet, so this is about as accurate as we can be, but every school is required to have that on their website, and it must be within a few clicks of the main page, so it's not like we're hiding it. And then talk to your high school counselor about accessing any scholarship opportunities, things like that. Feel free to raise your hand and ask questions, but this is our contact information. So if you ever want to stop by our office, this is where we're located. If you want to give us a phone call, those are some of our numbers. Our email is listed there, and those are general things, but it will all be directed to myself, Isabel, and Hannah. As I mentioned, we are a public open resource, so definitely ask us any questions, whether it's tonight or throughout the next couple of months as you all figure out what college is going to look like. Any questions for the group? Yes, ma'am. Yes. So the question about assets is, say that you get paid on payday and you're filing the form on payday and your account looks great because it has your most recent paycheck, everything is up to date, and you are loaded. And then 2 days later, all of your bills come out because you set them to go out 2 days after payday. Personally, I would wait to file the form until my bank account is at the lowest. So for example, we get paid once a month, last business day of the month. And so I would probably file it on like the 28th or the 29th, because that's when I'm pinching pennies, eating ramen out of the cupboard, hoping for the best to make it until payday. But you don't have to do that. That's just personally what I recommend, because you could be eligible for more aid than you would be on payday, depending on how big of a paycheck you have and how much you have in savings, et cetera. That's my biggest one. So I'm surprised I didn't actually mention that, because that's what my family and I did when we were filing the form, is we would wait until the day before payday and file it. But we also had a couple of months my family would always file around Christmas, after all of the Christmas gifts and year-end things came out. You guys don't necessarily have that luxury this year. I mean, maybe, because you'd be filing in January, because then it would be after the holidays and then you're really depleted. But yeah, that's my biggest tip, is to do it that way. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the question is, divorced, parents split everything 50-50, no one pays child support. How do they know which parent pays the most? They don't, and they will not be verifying that. Schools are also not allowed to verify that. So take that as you will. But my best advice is to follow the policies outlined. However, there is nothing in place to question that. They don't necessarily know that either, but if you like blatantly lie about it, you could be selected for verification, and then you would have to provide those accurate, up-to-date documents. So don't blatantly lie about what is in your accounts. I've had families ask me all sorts of shady questions of how to move things around. Use your best judgment. You know what your accounts look like. Be as accurate as possible. Yes, ma'am. Can you define liabilities? No, they don't look at any debts in the FAFSA form. They also do not consider that either. They do not consider student loans. That was the other question. Yes. Oh, Isabel. Correct. So I'm just going to repeat that for the live stream. 529 plans must be included on the FAFSA if it is in the name of anyone who's on the FAFSA form, so any parents and or student's name. If it is in, say, a grandparent's name, then it is not included on the FAFSA. That is something I will be doing for my future children. Yes, ma'am. A trust in your student's name? If it's in the grandparent's name, yeah, so if it's in the grandparent's name, then that's not included on the form. If it's in the student's name and they could be liable for paying taxes on it, et cetera, then that would need to be included in the form. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Yes, so if parents do not have social security numbers, there is supposedly a process in place that is going to help them file the form. They have not released information on that as soon as and it will not be available until the form is open, unfortunately. Again, our office is a resource for that, so the second that this form comes out, we are going to be filling it out, trying to figure out how to help people. But right now, we don't have much information on it. If the parent does not have a social security number, though, and your student does, they are still eligible for federal aid, and we highly recommend that you do file the form. However, we just don't have much information at this time, as that process is going to look very different than it did last year. It will likely, is what we're assuming, is going to be filing a paper FAFSA. So we recommend that your students start doing that as soon as the FAFSA becomes available so that it can be mailed in and dated prior to February 1st so that they are eligible for as much aid as possible. Yeah, so if you're a refugee and have a different identification number, you can still use that on the form. I saw a few hands here in the middle. Yes, ma'am. I believe the A+ program does require you to file the FAFSA, even if you don't take any aid from it. As part of that program, it is a requirement to file. Typically, so with the 51% of who would file the FAFSA for financial contributions, typically it's the parent that the student lives with, typically because housing and all of the typical day-to-day things, or who the student lives with most of the time is who that would be. That's what was previously said, but with child support, things like that, it could be the other parent that provides more. It just kind of depends on your specific situation. Oh, which one claimed them as a dependent? It does not matter. Yeah. Yes, sir. An FSA ID, maybe 10 minutes. It's just putting in your contact information, your social security number, and then create with your email, things like that. It will take a couple of days to verify that information, but the process of creating the ID itself is very straightforward. Yes, ma'am. Yes, so she asked a question about the scholarship amount that was listed, that if you are paying taxes on that. I can provide a personal example for that. So I'm currently in grad school, and because I work at SLU, I receive tuition remission. However, I only receive a certain amount of that is untaxed. Because I am taking more credits than that, I have like a couple of $100 that come out of my paycheck every month that I am paying taxes on. Because of the amount of scholarships that I am receiving from the institution that is over the amount that I would be eligible to receive for tuition benefits only. With that, if I were to file the FAFSA, I would need to say that I have received this amount of money in scholarship, or in my case, tuition remission, and then this is how much I've paid taxes on it. Most of your students will not be receiving scholarships that go above tuition. They could be receiving some scholarships that'll go towards housing and things like that, but it will not exceed that cost of attendance because schools don't let that happen. And so if it does get to that point, then you will receive what's called a 1098 form. And that will happen while your student is a freshman or ending their freshman year, starting their sophomore, junior, senior year, and it'll tell you exactly how much money they have received over that. You will receive several notices as to what you would need to be paying taxes on. That did not happen to me as an undergraduate student. I don't have any friends that it happened to as an undergraduate student. It is only currently happening to me as a graduate student because I am taking so many credit hours in an academic year that makes me eligible for so much aid that is typically above what a student would be receiving. Yes, ma'am. Correct. What you receive in a financial aid offer is not going to be what you file on the FAFSA. So SLU's scholarships, we'll say it's $10,000 a year. Congrats, you've been admitted to SLU. You've received a merit-based scholarship of $10,000 per year, $40,000 over the term of your bachelor's degree. That does not go on the FAFSA. Yes, ma'am. SLU does, like my office does not specifically. I know that maybe our like SOAR or TRIO or 1818 programs might. I can look into that and ask those departments and then get back to Nana to share with everybody, unless you know of one that does. Biggest piece of advice there for scholarships is start local, and all of the counselors will also say it's the same thing. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, I am waiting to apply to a couple of colleges. Should I still include them on my FAFSA? Yes. Even if you haven't applied to the school, you can include them on the FAFSA so that when you do apply, they will already have it on file. They won't send you anything prior because you won't have been admitted. There won't be an application record, things like that. But you can still send it to them. You can also go back and edit the form and add schools later on. So there's options there for that, but I would just include them from the start so that they already have it on file once they are determining your application and whether you will be admitted, because then they can get you your offer sooner rather than waiting on that FAFSA to come in. Yes, so there are lots of applications when going to college. So the first one is applying to the school itself. Most schools are on the common application, so your student can fill out one application and send it to several schools at once. They can also apply to each school individually, totally their preference. SLU has both options. Then there is the ACT or SAT. If your student decides to take the test, highly recommend you at least take it once, see what you get. Because you can be eligible for scholarships based on that score. And then there is the FAFSA application. So that's already 3 different things that your student and you need to be looking at and doing. So they're all separate. One does not cover the other. So definitely consider each of those aspects in the application or just college process in general. Yes, ma'am. You're good. Correct. So the parent and student sections are entirely separate on the FAFSA. again, I would highly recommend that you do this all together all at once. Spend a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, 1 hour together. It might be a little bit painful, but you all can do it. I believe in you. And so anything that the student puts on the form, the parent cannot see. Anything that the parent puts on the form, the student cannot see. There will be a summary at the end that kind of summarizes everything, but again, it does not go really question by question of what will be on there. And so if your student is like dead set on going to one school, but you were like, please apply to a backup school. What if you don't get in? What if it's too expensive? Please, please, please apply anywhere else. Please make sure that they're including that on the FAFSA so that they can be eligible for aid from that institution as well. It can't hurt. That is a school-by-school basis. So SLU looks at the initial filing date, but that is not every school. So again, put all of the schools on the first time around prior to February 1st. Yes, sit next to them. You're gonna miss them come fall. They're gonna miss you no matter how much they say they won't. Believe me, I missed my parents. I went 6 hours away and then they turned it into 15 and now I see them maybe once or twice a year and I still miss them. They will miss you. Spend that hour together, even if it's about finances. Correct. Yeah, so like Isabel mentioned, financial aid offers will be sent likely to the family home. SLU sends them via email now. We have a whole electronic thing, but some will still come by mail. And so everyone will need to look at that financial aid form, and you can tell whether you filed the FAFSA or that school was included on the FAFSA, because if you don't see those student loans, even if you're not going to take them, then the FAFSA was not sent to that school. So definitely make sure that all the schools are included on the form. Yes, ma'am. Yes, that's part of what is imported. The AGI is part of what's imported on that form. It will be sent to the student. So the student aid report will be sent to the student, and that's part of what's generated by the FAFSA. So that's something that we hope they share with their parents. Definitely ask for it. Since you all sat in on this presentation, know that a student aid report is coming via email to the student. You can look at that to verify that everything, especially school-wise, is on there. Previously, it was 1 to 3 days after filing. We are hoping for a similar timeline, but TBD. Yes, ma'am. That would be the ICER information sent to the schools. To the student? Oh. We were under the impression that schools would not receive that information, but the student it would be generated with their summary. So then that could be new information that we are still learning. Again, most of this is TBD. Yes, ma'am. Yes, so payment arrangements. Typically, it's split between terms. So, for example, SLU is on a 3-semester, but one of those semester is summer. So fall and spring semester payments are due at the beginning of August and beginning of January, We do offer 2 different types of payment plans. Both are monthly payment plans, so we do at the beginning of each month, 10 payments, August to December, January to May. And so you can do it that way. You can pay in full. You can use a 529 plan. You can use outside scholarships. And that's pretty standard for most institutions, is to offer a payment plan or those other options as well. Yes, yes. Yes, okay, so yeah, so you'll have your cost of attendance, and then the student aid index will be generated, and then you will get your financial aid offer. The schools will use the student aid index to generate that, and then all of that subtracted out, you'll have your remaining balance. Yes, ma'am. The student aid index is the same for each student across all schools, yes, but each offer will look different. So you could be eligible for work study at some schools and not eligible at other schools because of that difference of cost of attendance and your level of need at each school. I'm wishing we had the PowerPoint from last time. The presentation last time was a general financial aid 101 and has a really great graph sort of thing that visually depicts all of these questions. So definitely check that out. I know the slides and the recording are probably available across the Parkway School websites. You can fast forward through it, only look at the slides, whatever floats your boat, but definitely a very informative presentation. We also have a recording of it on our website, SLU's website. And then this presentation, the FAFSA presentation, we're doing a webinar on January 10th. So if you all wanted to tune into that and just to get more information, it's the same presentation. I will probably be giving that again, but in case you want a refresher, that will also be available. Okay, well, I will go ahead and let everyone go that does not have individual questions. Isabel will come join me at the front, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you and your family might have one-on-one. But thank you all for joining us tonight. And again, definitely reach out if you have any questions after this evening.